The most, I think, is the war.
When it comes to foreign relations, I will surely hope that our country and the leaders of our country will take a more diplomatic approach and stance to open up dialogue.
I'm really concerned about the fear factor.
I'm very concerned. I am proud to be an American, a U.S. citizen. I would like that to continue, and I see a negative view of our country.
What troubles me in particular is that we make very little effort as voters and as candidates to see how others look at America and see how others view the world and the world system of which they're a part.
At the present time, I think we have a unilateral foreign policy in a multilateral world. And the United States must play a bigger role in the world in participating in the various treaties and things like that. We've kind of backed off looking inward, and I think that is not realistic.
We're going to have to face the fact that in the next maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years, we're going to have people in the world who are extremists, who are going to plot attacks not only against Americans but against our allies around the world.
We've seen that the response to the 9/11 tragedy was the declaration of a war against terrorism and evil. But that declaration was used as political justification for the exercise of extraordinary executive branch powers.
Many of the provisions by the letter of the law of the Patriot Act are not really dangerous. There are other things that have occurred, not the Patriot Act, for instance, the detentions, the post-9/11 detentions, and even some continuing detentions that have nothing to do with the Patriot Act. This is by pre-existing law, and law as it's being evolving and being interpreted by courts.
Grants of additional power need to be very carefully considered before they go into effect, because once they go into effect, taking them back, whether the government is Democrat or Republican, is a very difficult undertaking.
There's still a real imbalance in terms of how education is being presented to such wide varieties of audiences.
And the educational system is being, the child left behind are being shortchanged.
To see people that are willing to take a stand for their children's education.
And that is a big, big issue for our family, for all children. And I'm very concerned about that.
Worried about Minnesota and where it's going, because we've always been looked to as the leader in education.
I don't think it's fair to say that this administration has not addressed education. I think it is fair to say that they've been rigid and unresponsive to the variety of needs in districts, rural and urban, all over America.
Many of us believed that No Child Left Behind was really about providing adequate resources and accountability to implement school reform and ensure that indeed no child was left behind.
The funding formula, the basic operating amount that school districts get per student, has actually stayed stable, and in fact will actually decline. It's the first time in the history of Minnesota that funding for K-12 education is actually decreasing. And we know that needs in our schools are increasing.
There continues to be a real struggle around No Child Left Behind. Just what are proper measurements? When does accountability become punitive instead of a measuring device? And frankly, educators, in a bipartisan way, are in a state of real confusion and some anger.
So schools are struggling to try to meet new standards, to attract people to the profession, to meet the challenging needs of the student population with less resources and more expectations placed on them.
You know, you don't see Bush and Kerry going out, reaching out to young people the way they do to the middle class and to, senior citizens, because they don't think we care, and we don't because we don't vote.
This is pretty much going to be my first election really voting. I just turned 18 last year, so I got this 18, so I can vote then. Minnesota. The reason I do what I do is because I want to cultivate. I want to cultivate a scene make voting sexy. I want politics to be really fun and exciting for everyone.
This is my first election, and I have definitely gotten more involved in politics because I realize that it is so important for people to know what's going on.
The last election in 2000, the margin was very slim, even though the Supreme Court ultimately decided it. What they were deciding on was a margin of 537 votes, which is very few people. I could talk to that many people myself.
I think a lot of people aren't involved because they don't see themselves in politics. They don't see themselves and the issues that they care about reflected in the things that are being talked about on TV. They don't feel like anybody really cares, and we have a really, really cynical country, and it's made my generation really cynical.
I don't think we've ever had such a negative campaign very early in the process where there's been so much attacking going both ways. And I think that's most unfortunate. I think one thing it does is to turn people off the system.
People will stay home if they think their vote doesn't count.
You are leaving to the zealots on both ends of the political spectrum the opportunities and the responsibility for picking our leadership and setting our policy agendas for the future.
Voting, in a sense, is a form of leadership because it's choosing or hiring who's going to lead us.
We need to elect people that really believe in investing in people. Our economic stability is based on a well-educated workforce.
Decisions we make today in this election will have implications for generations to come.
If we don't vote, then we inevitably result in the lowest common denominator.
If you don't get into politics, politics is going to get into you.
Vote on November 2nd.
Because if you don't vote, my vote's more important.
If you do not vote, you are in fact casting a vote for someone who you don't want to be elected. That's the sure thing.